the most simple and easiest one is to simply say that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like you have this, I talk about the idea that you really are not done listening well until you have an aha in your head that goes, oh, now I get it. Now I understand why my wife was hurt, my daughter was hurt, my friend was hurt, my coworker was upset, frustrated.
Welcome again to It Doesn't Take a Genius, conversation with introspective perspectives and pithy points of view. Here are your hosts, my friends, Max and Marty.
I think that's Mark and Mike.
Yeah, whatever.
And we're back. I've always wanted to say that, Mark. This is the second part of a two-part series on a book by Mark Olsey called The Pledge of a Lifetime. It's about his acronym for going through conflict called PLEDGE. It's the Pledge Talk. So Mark, we left things. By the way, thank you so much for doing this. This is really, really cool stuff. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
You bet. We left it. We had talked about we're going to pause and do some internal work and then come back to the conversation ready to listen and really listen to understand really what they are meaning, even though they might be saying it in a way that's making it difficult for me. And then we're going to, even though it seems silly to some people, we're going to echo back what we think we heard them say and see whether or not we landed on the right meaning and understanding of what they meant. Now, in my background, we called that reflective listening. And once you had done that, you sort of got your answer. Maybe you needed to get a little more clarification, but they basically said, yeah, you understand it. And then I was ready to move on to sort of, resolving it. But you have added something that I think is really clever here, because you don't move straight to resolution. After the listening stage, after the echoing stage, where you echo back what you think you heard him say, your next step is the D in pledge is disarm. Right. So tell us about disarm.
Sure. So I realized, again, all of this came out of just working with couples in my marriage counseling practice and watching them try to communicate, and because of my training and life and everything else, I've become incredibly self-aware. So I'm very aware of myself, what's going on inside of me, thoughts-wise, feelings-wise, and so forth. And I recognized that, again, first of all, we all want to be heard.
That's right.
Right. And so listening to really understand the other person and what they want us to hear is so important.
Yeah.
But then when any one of us speaks, we're doing so hoping the other person is getting it. Otherwise, we wouldn't talk.
Yeah.
But we don't know if they're getting it. And so that's where the importance of echoing is, because if someone echoes us back well, then we go, they heard us. And we may not do that. I'm a little bit demonstrative in some way, but inside there's this, oh, good, they heard me.
Yeah.
I know they heard me.
Yeah.
But at that point, there's another thing that happens. And this is what I noted and became aware of even internally myself. There's this part of us that says, good, they heard me. And we say to ourselves either, I wonder if it makes sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
Or we say to ourselves, oh, good, they heard us, but do they think I'm crazy for thinking that?
Right.
Do they think I'm weird? Do they think it's just kind of stupid, right? We have those, the internal self-doubt.
Yeah.
That's there. I mean, you're shaking your head. Can you relate to what I'm saying, Mark?
So I have a general manager of a big auto group that I used to work with, and he would receive all the heat cases for his campus, and it was a big campus. And so, I mean, you could be on the phone all day long, all the different departments, and, one disgruntled customer per department, and you'd have, just a full schedule. So he would, have to make these phone calls, and I would sit across the desk from him, and, you'd hear these people through the phone, just blasting him. And he was so clever. I didn't realize this, but that's what he was doing. He was listening. He would echo back just a little bit. Sometimes it was just in the form of, just Just
Sure.
in coaching, we called them good gutturals.
Sure.
He would just make these little noises that showed he was really truly listening, trying to understand.
Yeah.
He'd let them get it all out, vent, 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 and then he would he was bald. He'd rub his bald head and go, "Well, if that had happened to me, I'd be pretty frustrated."
Yeah.
Or I'd be upset, or whatever would be the appropriate emotion. And you would just hear through the phone, the volume go down, the steam come out of the engine. Finally, thank you, you get it, thank you.
Someone has finally heard me,
Exactly.
and they don't think I'm just being just a complainer.
Right.
They really see that I'm upset for a reason. And what that manager did was he disarmed the tension,
Right.
or disarmed the conflict,
Right.
by validating the other person's frustration or concern.
So it's funny, because I was thinking about this: pausing, listening, echoing, disarming. It's really validating, right? And the result is disarming. But that disarming is so that is so the pinnacle of what we're trying to get to, that the defensiveness comes out and people feel like, yes, you get me, now we can move forward. It's called the disarming step. Plus it makes pledge work. The acronym wouldn't work.
Right, exactly. I needed a word for there.
No.
No, but you think about it again. Think about how earlier in episode 1 we talked about how we don't like conflict. Very few people do, right?
Right.
We want to see it, both sides disarmed.
Yeah.
As soon as we can, in the best way we can, and in the best way we can. Now, too often we can try to do it too quickly and not listen well. So we need to be careful with that.
Yeah.
But we want to disarm what's happening and the conflict itself and the tension between us, so we can get back to a better place.
Yeah. And only if it's all uncovered and all heard, and the person feeling like you really did get what I was trying to say, you really did validate that, only then can you really move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be true for you. It'd be true for me.
Yeah.
That's why these steps are not something I just created. These things are these are true, like truisms for us.
So let me ask, you're saying, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about how, we talked last time about, a word that was said that 10 years later, it's still harboring, some bitterness on the part of somebody who was on the receiving end of that. And we talked about, the faster you do this, the better, the quicker you get to saying, you know what, let's pause before this becomes a big thing. So I don't know if you can give a sense of this, Mark, and it may be an unfair question to ask you, but if you do it, if you get to pledge quickly and you start the process of pausing and listening, does the disarming become easier? I guess is my question. Does it become easier? If you catch something early, does it make it easier to disarm?
Well, that's a good question. I think I have two thoughts. One is, I think it makes the whole process easier.
Okay.
Right. The quicker and sooner we get to it, because again, the words that have been said or the reactivity or whatever has happened already has hurt this much. But if it goes on for an hour or a day or a week, the pain is so much deeper.
Right.
The loss of trust and the wounding is so much greater. It's all of it's so much harder to overcome. So the quicker we get to using the steps, makes the whole process go easier.
Got it.
My first thought. My second thought is, does it make the actual step of validating easier? I just think I would just have to say yes, because I think we're not so over the top emotionally yet, because we've gotten to it quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm more apt to be able to have the rational part of my brain, in gear. And so I'm more apt to be able to understand and be understanding and communicate that your side, your perspective makes sense.
So I'll give you a quick example that I think maybe applies to what you just said. This has happened in a number of my clients where there was a schedule conflict. and somebody felt like they were having to bear the burden of schedule changes or somebody being off more than another person. And there are all sorts of reasons why that might be happening. But if you can catch the fact that, oh, you're frustrated about this, and I can understand that because right now you're bearing the burden of a sudden schedule change, and now you're working nights more than you thought you were, or you missed a weekend that you thought you were going to get. That's easier to catch at the beginning of the schedule change and say, oh, I'm sorry. It's, for some people, it's like, my weekend is with my kid. That was the weekend that I had custody, for instance.
Yeah.
And so to catch that early, even though it's kind of a big deal, right? Because they missed a weekend with their kid, but that's a lot better than at the end of the summer when they missed a whole summer with their kid and having that discussion again, right? Now it's gone to you've been an existential threat to my family. We a whole summer gone. So that, that's happened. Those situations have happened, and it's much easier to get that on the front end than the back end. It's real damage that's been done, or real hurt, but not that maybe we won't even be able to fix it, right? Maybe it's just, it is what it is, and the summer got changed, and I'm so sorry, but that's what's happened in our workplace because Bob has cancer. Who knows what it is, but things like that. Let's go ahead and validate their feelings on the front end instead of waiting all summer for them to be upset.
Beautiful, Mark. Okay. And so it helps because we're doing it up front, like you say, rather than waiting until the end of the summer. This is the other thing that happens, and that is that we may not be able to change things, but at least I'm saying to you, your frustration makes sense, and I can appreciate where you're coming from. And at least that person feels heard, understood, and those are huge components for all of us.
Right.
And huge, heard, understood, and they're at least a little bit okay because someone at least gets what's going on with me, and the other person appreciates my frustration. Right.
I think another thing that comes up here in the workplace is so many times you hear a complaint about pay. So it'll be time off or it'll be pay. And what I have noticed, and I have a lot of clients I suspect who are going to really disagree with what I'm about to say, but when people bring up pay, it's probably not about pay. If you pay them enough money to take the money issue off the table, and they start bringing, and you have to judge that for yourself. You have to decide whether or not you're being fair and giving honest wages. But if you are, and they start talking about, I don't get paid enough to do this. What's this? What do you mean enough? Let's start asking some questions and do a little diagnostic. And I bet that by the time you do some listening and echoing and disarming, you're not talking about pay anymore. You're talking about whatever the issue is that's affecting engagement, fairness in the workplace, or how they're talked to, or, fill in.
How much do you really value me?
Right. How much you really value me. I love how you say that. That's a great point. So, but anyway, so listening, echoing, disarming, these are the three things that the person who pressed the pause button is probably taking the lead on and trying to do. Okay.
Perfect. That's great. And so then one of the things I talk about is there's a few different phrases that I think are helpful to keep in mind, to be aware of.
So good.
Of what to do and how to be disarming. And it's the most simple and easiest one is to simply say that makes sense. Okay. Like you have this, I talk about the idea that you really are not done listening well until you have an aha in your head that goes, now I get it. Now I understand why my wife was hurt, my daughter was hurt, my friend was hurt, my coworker was upset, frustrated, felt unvalued. Now it's not a okay, I got it now. It's nothing like that. It's like it really makes sense. So it's like, oh, and you have that aha moment. Well, once you have that aha moment, you've come to a place of hearing what they wanted you to hear. You can echo back that aha. So you're feeling ultimately, really, I don't value you. Right. And maybe the wage thing is part of that idea. You just don't feel like I really think you're all that important to the company. And he or she goes, that's it. Yes, I think it's it. Well, now once you've had that aha and you can see it from their perspective, it's pretty simple to say that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it quiets that internal voice in their head that is saying, does he really get it? Does he think I'm crazy? Does he think I'm just another complaining employee out here? Or does it really matter even? And when I say that makes sense, it's like it quiets all of that. And again, it quiets the tension, it disarms.
So you make a point in the book that if you can't say that makes sense, or you got a number of phrases that are perfect here, I can appreciate that you say that, or I can accept that, or things. Even I apologize, I think, is one of your phrases.
Sure.
You might be at that point where you can say, I get it, and I apologize for the way that
it's on me. I see that.
Yeah, you could go there. If you can't say any of those phrases, if you really don't feel like you've got an honest, disarming phrase that you can use, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Often comes up. And I think what is happening most often is there's a one confusing thought. Most people think that if I say that makes sense, or I can appreciate that, is that they are now agreeing with the other person's perspective totally. Yeah. They're all right. I'm all wrong. All the thoughts that I had that I
just lost the argument.
I just lost the argument, and I can't go there. I mean, so there's a lot of that going on, right?
Right.
And in part to the degree that it's like, I'm not going there because I'm going to lose the argument. I'm saying, if that's where you're at, you're in the wrong place, period, in the conversation.
Go back to pause, right?
You go back to pause, exactly.
Yeah.
A short aside here is I tell people that ultimately I'm not training them even how to resolve conflict or even how to have great conversations. What I'm teaching them is how to love well or respect others well in the way they communicate.
That's right. That's right.
So if that becomes an internal part of who I am, my motivation is I'm in this conversation because I want you to know that I respect you, or I want you to feel valued or cared for or loved, whatever word fits the conversation, the relationship best at the moment. If that's my heart, that's my motivation. And then I'm using the Pledge Talk principles that way. The likelihood is there's going to be a greater connection for sure in conflict resolution anyways. So that's all just an aside.
Yeah.
Coming back with the idea that, again, if I'm saying, well, I'm going to lose the argument, then my heart, my motivation is not in the right place because I'm not in this to respect, honor, to value, to love. So people think, again, that's the first part. It's a confusing thought that if I say that I'm saying they're all right, I'm all wrong. And that's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm saying is, have you listened well enough so that you can simply understand how they arrived at their perspective?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, back to you're in my conflict, Mark. Oh, Mark was like, because I wasn't prepared and so forth, and he felt this and thought this, and I go, oh, I can see why you might think that way.
Right. Right.
And then I say, that makes sense.
Yeah. So back to my car dealer, he would say, if that had happened to me, I would feel. He's not even saying that it did happen, right? Because he's going to go talk to his employees and find out there's another side to the story. And, it's happened before. There's actually a saying in the industry, Mark, that you would know, buyers are liars. There are a lot of times where, and in fact, Christians get a bad rap for this because, he's a Christian. He's coming in with that used car that has a completely rebuilt transmission that he's not going to tell me about and say he's going to trade it in. And it's, a car worth X and it's really not. So, there are some negative things that happen. And so he doesn't need to admit to anything or take responsibility for anything yet. He just needs to make sure they feel heard about what they're saying is the thing that's bothered him. And that's where disarm comes. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'm stretching this out, but so I've taken the lead in pausing, in listening, echoing back, what I was understanding, disarming by just affirming, like, if that's what you sense, then I can understand how frustrating that would be, or whatever your
Right.
statement would be. That makes sense. Where do you go from here?
So it's good. So yeah. So we're four steps through the 6, and at this point, if we've done this well, if we've paused, listened, echoed, and disarmed by validating the other person well, if we've done that, when I say well, is I've really taken the time to do that. I've really sought to hear what they want to say and echo back and validate sincerely, because I care about this person, whether it's my customer or my friend or my spouse.
Yep.
What happens is that the other person has this experience. I'm going to act it out again a little bit, but the other person goes, they literally relax.
Yeah.
The tension goes away.
Yeah. Everything deflates.
Everything deflates.
Yeah.
And there's no more reason to argue, because they've made their point and their point has been heard. And it's not crazy. It's been validated.
Yep.
So what happens here is, when I do teaching and training, I carry one of my microphones with me.
So for those who are just listening, Mark is holding up a gigantic inflatable microphone.
Okay. Yes, exactly. Thank you for the clarification work. So yeah. So, when I do some modeling of this, when I teach and train people, and I have 2 people up in the audience, and the one who's talking gets the microphone, right?
Yep.
The other person is listening, echoing, and disarming by validating. And when they do that well, what happens is, really quite naturally, is the person who was talking, who did have the microphone, they actually kind of reach out and say, "Do you have anything you'd like to say?"
Oh, interesting. So like you psychologically see that happen.
Oh, it's not even psychological. I mean, I see it physically happening.
Right.
I've done this over and over again, and people just say, "Do you have anything you want to say?"
Oh, that's
and
funny.
and because they have felt heard, cared for, respected, valued, and loved, something happens inside.
Yeah.
Now they're open and willing and even desirous of hearing your perspective.
They're ready to listen now.
And they're ready to listen now. It's so amazing.
Fascinating.
And if it doesn't happen, if the other person was having a conversation with my daughter one time through a conflict, and she was like, "Oh, that's so amazing. Dad heard me, understood me, like this stuff." And I waited about 30 seconds, waited a minute, thinking I did have a few things I'd like to share, but she never said anything. And I said, "Hon, I have a few things that I'd like to share that I think will add to the conversation and help us even more. Could I give my thoughts?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, Dad. I know the process. I'm so sorry. I forgot about it." And she gave me the microphone. Like,
what a good daughter.
Oh, what a good daughter. That next step, the 5th step, is give.
Give. Okay.
Either I am given the opportunity to share my perspective after I have loved and valued and respected the other person well, because of listening, echo, and disarming, or I ask if I can give my perspective.
Right.
So what happens most often is, there's 2 people and they're grabbing the microphone from each other, arguing, interrupting, and saying, "That's not true. That's not true." And they're doing this, and the conflict just escalates. What incredible difference it makes if I'm offered the microphone.
Yeah.
Or I ask, can I give my perspective and thoughts?
So this is a fairly short step, but it has to be done the right way, right? You can't demand, now's my chance to talk. All right. I heard you. Now you're going to hear me. That's not what's happening here, right?
Well, and just hear the motivation, even as you say that, Mark. I heard you. Now you need to hear me. It's a demanding. It's not love,
right?
It's not valuing the other, respecting. It's not healthy and helpful to the conversation. No, I've loved well, and that person feels loved, and they now invite me, or I can ask them to do that. And there's an important little mini step right in between disarm and give. And that is, there actually needs to be another little break of just some quiet. If I said, "Mark, I understand why you're upset. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared 2 weeks ago when we tried this. Man, I'm sorry. That makes sense." I could, and what typically often happens is we do this. We say, "Okay, I understand why you're frustrated, but look, it really wasn't my fault, and I was it." And I'm just, I'm right in.
Right.
And I go from understanding or validating you to
Mhm.
defending me with the but word right in the middle.
Yep. Yep. And it's it makes it clear that you were just listening to get your chance to attack. The pause gives the mini pause gives a chance for you to really validate that no, I just wanted to understand you.
Exactly.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Because otherwise, if I say, yeah, but the message, the effect of that is, as you said, I wasn't really listening to understand. I was just listening to being courteous so that I can say what I want to say.
Okay.
So it's so important. I say, it makes sense. I validate and I get quiet.
All right. So what do you do with that once you have been given the opportunity? You have the metaphorical mic in your hand. What's next here?
Sure. So then it's on me to share my thoughts and my perspective. And there's actually another acronym, pledge talk. Talk is also an acronym of, now that I have the microphone, how do I talk in such a way that what I say is most likely to be heard. So it's careful. It's also true that when I have the microphone, that we got to be careful about how we present.
Yeah.
Because again, as I present my thoughts, my concerns, whatever, again, death and life, power of the tongue, it's
Right.
still all there. I've got to be careful how I do it. So I share my perspective. And if the other person understands the pledge because they've been taught this, then they go back up and kind of loop back around. And now they pause, listen, echo, and disarm by validating my thoughts.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about talk, or we're going to definitely link to a lot of resources. I feel like we might get
Yeah, that's going to
get
be
out of control here.
That's another show.
Well, we'll have you back for episode 3 at some point. I'm confident of that. All right. So the final step here then, once we've been given the opportunity and that has happened and we've been listened to, you say the final E in pledge is engage. Can you explain what you mean by engage?
So I mean a couple things by that. Yes, thank you. First of all, it's just the idea of engaging this process around and around, maybe more than once. So now you listen to my perspective about what happened and how we weren't ready for 2 weeks ago and so forth. And you're listening, echoing and disarming by validating me.
Yeah.
But then that's the first time I know that you've heard my thoughts. So then after I have felt validated by you, I might give you the microphone back again and say, is there anything else further you would like to say about what I just said?
Yeah. Because there's some new meaning injected into the conversation, and that's got to be addressed. Yeah.
Exactly. So then I just loop back up, or I engage the process again and come back again to pause, listen, echo, disarm. And then you might do the same for me as well, coming back again. So it gives that idea.
Yeah.
The second, which is, I think, really important. The second idea is this, and my son came up with this. It's just a really wonderful thought. He said, Dad, one time, he said, Dad, I've been thinking about the engage step. And he said, when a person understands these principles well, they grow in their confidence that they can actually enter into and have difficult conversations because they know what to do.
Yep.
I tell my clients all the time, my wife and I, after 40 years of marriage, we still have conflict. But here's the difference between you and I. I'm not so afraid of it because number one, and number two. And the reason I'm not afraid of it is because of number two. We know exactly what to do when it happens. So my wife and I, if we had a conflict earlier today, we're going to go up later today and we're going to sit down and we are going to have a good, helpful, healthy conflict conversation. And so he said, Dad, because you know this, or a person learns this, they can purposely choose to engage in conversations with others who are on opposite sides or opposite perspectives.
That's right.
And choose to have difficult conversations.
Yep.
Or as the other author says, crucial conversations.
Crucial, yeah.
And engage in difficult conversations. And who knows what kind of benefits could come out of that.
That's right.
I thought, so good, so wonderful. We all, and this goes back to we live in such a day and age where there's such polarization.
Yeah.
And we're not coming to the table to have good, helpful, healthy conversations. We're just standing on the corners, picketing against each other and so forth. And it's only getting worse. And my concern is, oh, how we wish we could sit down and have good, healthy, helpful conversations.
Yeah, and the way you say that, that would not be a conversation where anything gets brushed under the rug, right? It would be a real conversation where we're talking about hard things that we may disagree on and we may stay disagreeing on. And we're going to have to figure out a way to move forward in a way where I understand that you hear me and you understand that I hear you. And that can be the basis for moving forward in a relationship.
Yeah, and not only hear each other, but we can see and we can appreciate each other's perspective.
Yeah,
there's some validity. Now I see why you're thinking that way, and because of that, we may still disagree, but because of that, our relational connection has been created or deepened, and so we can still move forward.
So we're probably heading to a wrap up here, but I want to say one other thing that you keep saying this word, love. And this is a workplace podcast.
Sure.
Love, actually, I used to work with a lot of Ford dealerships, and Ford had a question on their survey that said, how much do you agree or disagree with this statement? I love, Hometown Motors Ford. And the dealers, they got so frustrated with it because they would say things like, I love my wife, I don't love, love a company. But of course, that's maybe only partly true, right? We'll say things like, I love my Yeti cooler. We'll say things like that, right? But be that as it may, I do want to point out that we are talking about human beings. And so I do a lot of work with DISC, the workplace. I shouldn't say workplace, the behavioral styles, communication styles that DISC describes, and we're all different. And if I adapt to your style, probably there's a better chance of us being able to communicate and work together and have conflict and so on. But something that I always tell my clients when we're going through DISC and they're realizing how powerful a tool it is to have conversations with customers or employees or bosses, I'll say, now listen, you have to be really careful here that you don't use DISC to manipulate. You have to use DISC to demonstrate that you're caring for this person. And I have said out loud, this is your chance to love the customer, show care for them, love the employee, show care for them. So you keep, I think, using it in a similar way. And I guess I just wanted to pause and say out loud, first off, love is 100% appropriate in the workplace because these are human beings that you're dealing with. And B, you have just given us a really powerful tool, and you need to be careful that it's used in love and not used as a tool to get your way and manipulate, because it won't work, or God forbid, it will work, and you will be much the poorer for it. It is a long-term disaster. So I wanted to say that out loud. I don't know if you have to react to it, but I thought we.
Well, I so appreciate that. I think it's so true, and I appreciate the idea that we're all humans. At the core of our beings, every one of us wants to be loved.
That's right.
That's just true.
That's right.
The language probably comes out of more of my marriage counseling where I'm doing all that, and as I'm interjecting into the workplace more and more of the ideas that I teach. One little final thing. It's interesting. Crucial Learning, the organization, the book came out of Crucial Conversations. They recently did some research that said that 85% of employees appreciate further training.
That's right.
Okay, in the workplace, but they especially appreciate it if what they're trained in helps them also in their personal life. Yeah. And my thought is, Pledge Talk is going to help everybody in their workplace environment. Absolutely, no doubt. But then they're also going to go home and use it with a friend, with a spouse, with a child, with their own parents, anything like that. And those relationships stand the chance to getting much better. And therefore, having a better relationship at home is going to help bring about a better experience for them and those around them at the workplace.
So we for very similar reasons, we at HipSocket have been doing a monthly coaching workshop, and it's a series that we take managers through to learn how to better coach. And one of the managers came back about halfway through the year, and said that his wife at one point had looked at him in frustration at some point during the day and said, "When are you going back to one of those hip socket conferences?" So it works at home.
Yes, yes. Great.
All right.
That's
So
great.
let me ask you this. I know we have at least one senior minister of a big multi-site, multi-campus church, another sort of bigger church they've reached out to us and let us know they're listening with their leadership team, and all sorts of different clients we have in the workplace, and whoever knows who else might be hearing this. But what would you say is like your ideal client, Mark, to work with?
Oh, again, thanks for asking the question, Mark. Ideal. Okay. This is my ideal. It totally makes sense to me as why this would be so good. But here's my ideal client. My ideal client would be the pastor of a church, the company president or CEO, a principal of a school, anybody at all that says, what if our entire organization understood a language and a process where we all understood it and knew it together, so that, number one, it deepened our connections, and number two, when we have conflict, which we inevitably will, because conflict is a part of life, we will all be on the same page, knowing what to do and how to have that healthy conflict conversation.
Yeah.
What if an entire church, the entire body, knew this?
Yeah.
And so I was looking for a pastor who says, I want my entire church to know this. This is so important. Or a boss or president to say, I want my entire organization to know this, or even a school. I mean, that'd be my ideal client who says, I understand the importance of this. I know we're going to have conflict. We don't know what to do. We weren't trained. But what if we all did know? What kind of a difference would that make?
And had a common vocabulary around.
And had a common vocabulary and process.
I love that. Okay.
The vocabulary and the process.
So we're going to put links to your stuff in the show notes. Again, the book is The Pledge of a Lifetime by Mark Olze, Oelze. And do you want to just mention where we can learn more?
Yeah, just go to my website, pledgetalk.com.
Beautiful.
And there's different things there. I'm going to get some resources up. I have a one-page infographic you can take, you can learn, or a shortened version of it as well. You'll be able to download. You can do that. And there's videos if you want to go back through and watch me teaching each step again. You can get that right from my website. And then there's also a learning community. During COVID, I spent hundreds of hours of creating an online learning community where I did a lot of teaching, a lot of video courses and so forth about the material. And a person could go much deeper. So you can have access to all that just by going to pledgetalk.com.
Pledgetalk.com. And I will say it's just an embarrassment of resources on his site. So definitely worth checking out if you at all resonate with this material. All right. So Mark, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. And by the way, I was never in conflict with you about the fact that we couldn't get audio to work last time. I just want to say that.
Oh, good. But I just wanted to bring that up just in case we were.
Right.
So.
All right.
Right, thank you. I really appreciate it. This has been great fun and a real delight. And I'm just very appreciative. Thank you for letting me be on your podcast.
Ditto. Just great resources for our clients and listeners. And we'll let that be the last word, except for Mr. John Wolf, who will give us a little thought here at the end.
And there you have it. Another session of contemporaneous extemporizing from Mark and Mike. I know it's redundant, but consider who we're talking about. As always, feel free to share the ideas you heard here. No rights are reserved, no permissions needed. Thanks. See you next time on It Doesn't Take a Genius.
That's good enough.